You ever have a night where fate kicks the door open and laughs in your face? Edward Williams would later ask himself that, replaying the moment in his mind like a grainy film loop. In that instant he froze, heart slamming against his ribs, as the door he'd pushed open revealed Vera Frederick, the 27-year-old CEO of Whitmore Industries, standing vulnerable, barely wrapped in a white towel, her dark hair dripping from a post-workout shower, her eyes wide with shock that mirrored his own. Edward stumbled back, the cold hallway tiles scorching beneath his work boots. "I thought this was the electrical room," he stammered, voice cracking, retreating before the door shut with a soft, final click. His face burned with a mix of shame and dread as he hurried down the corridor, the fluorescent lights buzzing like a warning. The elevator's slow descent felt eternal, each second ticking closer to losing the job he desperately needed. At 42, Edward had endured worse, laid off twice, once falsely accused of theft after 6 years of loyal service. He'd clawed his way back for one reason, his 10-year-old daughter, Lily, whose smile was the only currency that mattered. The maintenance job at Whitmore Industries was his lifeline, a fragile thread to stability. Now, it felt like it was unraveling because of one wrong turn in a labyrinth of corporate glass and steel. June 12, 2024. In the basement, the sharp scent of bleach and machine oil grounded him, a familiar anchor in the storm of his thoughts. Edward leaned against a metal supply shelf, gripping its edges until his knuckles whitened, trying to steady his spiraling mind. It wasn't just that he'd invaded someone's privacy, he'd crossed into her world. Vera Frederick wasn't just any CEO. She was Chicago's tech prodigy, a name whispered in boardrooms and newsrooms alike, young, brilliant, and, by rumor, unforgiving. Edward didn't know her story, only the weight of her presence, like a current that could pull you under if you weren't careful. That night at home, in their cramped Southside apartment, Lily sat at the scarred kitchen table, munching baby carrots, her legs swinging beneath the chair. "Why so quiet, Daddy?" she asked, peering up with those wide, knowing eyes. "You look like you dropped your soul down a drain." He forced a chuckle, ruffling her hair. "Just tired, pumpkin." Long night at the Big Glass Castle. The next day passed in an eerie silence. No call from HR, no reprimand, not even a glance from management. Edward moved like a ghost through his maintenance shifts, avoiding the executive floors and that fateful door with a vigilance that bordered on paranoia. The building's hum, air vents, elevators, the faint pulse of servers, felt like it was watching him. On Friday, John, the grizzled security guard with a memory like a steel trap, cornered him near the freight elevator, a styrofoam cup of coffee in hand. "Boss lady asked your name," John said, his voice low, like he was sharing a secret. "Didn't yell, didn't fire, just asked." Edward took the cup, his fingers brushing the warm surface. "That's it." "That's it," John replied, his eyes glinting with something like amusement. "Might be your chance, son, or your test. Tread light." That weekend, Edward sat at his kitchen table, the city's distant sirens filtering through the cracked window. He stared at a blank page until his knuckles ached, then wrote, not to beg or deflect, but to explain, to apologize, to own the mistake. 5 drafts later, he slipped the envelope to John, his heart heavy with the gamble. June 15, 2024, Monday evening, Edward was adjusting a ceiling panel on the 11th floor, the air thick with the scent of polished wood and ambition, when he heard the sharp cadence of heels on marble. He turned, and there stood Vera, polished in a navy blazer, her expression unreadable as a locked vault. "Edward Williams?" she asked, her voice steady but probing. He nodded, bracing himself. "I read your letter," she said, holding his gaze with an intensity that made the room feel smaller. "You didn't make excuses. Most people would." Silence stretched between them, taut as a wire, until she handed him a clipboard. "I need the lighting reconfigured in my office suite. Night shift, full access." It wasn't forgiveness, nor warmth, but something rarer, trust, fragile and unearned, yet offered. Later that night, Edward passed the infamous door again. He paused, the memory of that moment flashing like a warning light, then kept walking. Some doors, once opened, are meant to stay shut, but their lessons echo through every step that follows. June 17, 2024, At home, Lily lay asleep, her history book splayed across her chest, pages dog-eared with her relentless curiosity. Edward pulled the blanket over her, whispering, "Maybe things are finally turning, baby." He didn't yet grasp how true or how tangled that hope would become. The following week unfolded like a tightrope walk. Edward moved through Whitmore's corridors with a janitor's invisibility, but now with a heightened awareness. The clipboard Vera had given him wasn't just a task, it was a signal, a crack in the corporate armor. He kept his eyes on the lights, the wires, the tools, avoiding her office unless summoned. Vera was a force, commanding boardrooms filled with men twice her age, her words clipped, her presence a storm in a silk blouse. She hadn't fired him, hadn't reported him, and that alone kept him returning night after night, tools in hand, doubts in check. June 24, 2024, one Tuesday, as he adjusted the recessed lighting above her desk, the room bathed in the soft glow of evening, Vera stood by the window, phone pressed to her ear. Her voice was low, sharp, cutting through the quiet. "I don't care how big their portfolio is. If they can't respect boundaries, we're done." She ended the call and turned, her eyes catching Edward's. "Williams, got a minute?" He stepped down from the ladder, wiping his hands. "Yes, ma'am." She gestured to a side table where a sleek lamp flickered. "Do these need special bulbs? They burn out faster than the rest." He examined one, unscrewing the top with care. "Halogens. Decorative, but not built for long hours. I'd recommend LEDs, less heat, longer life." She nodded once, decisive. "Make the change." It was a small exchange, but to Edward, it felt like a bridge forming, tentative but real. June 25, 2024, the next night as he packed his toolbox, Vera surprised him again. "Williams, are you always on the night shift?" He looked up, caught off guard. "Yes, ma'am. Easier with my daughter. I pick her up from school in the afternoons." Vera tilted her head, a flicker of curiosity softening her edges. "You have a daughter?" "Lily. 10, smart as a whip, but hates math," he said with a quiet chuckle. Vera didn't smile, but her posture eased. "I hated math too," she said, almost to herself, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. Over the next few days, they began to exchange words, not many, but genuine. Vera offered fragments of her life, taking over Whitmore at 25 after her father's sudden death, working 14-hour days because stopping felt like surrender, living alone with no siblings, no pets, no one waiting at home. "Some think being alone means you're lonely," she said one evening, her voice barely above a whisper. "But sometimes it's just protecting yourself from disappointment." Edward listened, offering no advice, only presence. Years of being underestimated, as a janitor, as a black man in a world quick to dismiss, had taught him to read rooms, to know when to speak and when to vanish. Yet Vera kept pulling him back, her trust a quiet, unexpected tether. June 26, 2024, one night as they reviewed a floor schematic under the hum of fluorescent lights, the building's power flickered, not a simple blink, but a deep, humming pulse that vibrated through the walls. Edward's instincts kicked in, sharp as a blade. "That's not normal," he muttered, rushing toward the main panel in the basement, his boots echoing in the empty corridor. Vera followed, her heels clicking with purpose. He yanked open the control box, his flashlight beam catching a glint of something foreign, an override chip tucked beneath the circuit board. "This shouldn't be here," he said, his voice tight. Vera's eyes narrowed, her breath catching. "Are you saying someone sabotaged our system?" Edward didn't answer immediately, his fingers tracing the chip's edges. He pulled out his phone and snapped a photo, the flash stark in the dim light. "I'm saying this doesn't belong." The air thickened with tension. Vera scanned the shadows, her voice low. "Who else has access to this level?" Edward listed the usual: IT, security, facilities, a roster too long, too porous. "Don't say anything to anyone," she said, her tone sharp but steady. "Not yet." July 1, 2024, in the days that followed, Edward couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a prickle at the back of his neck as he moved through the building's arteries. He began checking CCTV feeds when John wasn't looking, his fingers hovering over the grainy screens. One night, He noticed something. Between midnight and 1 a.m., the executive floor feeds glitched, brief, deliberate flickers near the server room. He brought it to Vera, meeting her in her office, the city's skyline a glittering backdrop through the floor-to-ceiling windows. She leaned over his shoulder, her perfume subtle but distracting. "This isn't a glitch," she said, her voice low. "Someone's covering their tracks." Edward swallowed. "This doesn't feel right, ma'am." "I agree," she said, her eyes locking onto his. That night, she handed him a second clipboard, not wiring instructions, but floor plans, access logs, names. "I need someone I can trust," she said, her voice softer than he'd ever heard. "Not just to fix lights, but to find who's trying to break something bigger." Edward stared at the papers, then at her. "You sure you want to trust the guy who opened your door by mistake?" She met his gaze, unflinching. "That mistake was human. What's happening here is not." He took the clipboard, the weight of her words settling into his bones. July 4, 2024, at home, Lily noticed his distraction. "Are you a detective now, Daddy?" she teased, her eyes sparkling with mischief. He kissed her forehead, the warmth of her trust grounding him. "Something like that, baby girl." He didn't know where this path led, but for the first time in years, Edward Williams felt seen, not as a mistake or a problem, but as a man with something to protect and uncover. The next night, the clipboard burned with silent urgency, a puzzle of broken routines, lingering shadows, and data that didn't add up. Janitors were invisible, but Edward's eyes missed nothing. A flicker at 1:15 a.m., an office door that never latched, the faint scent of cigarette smoke in a smoke-free building. He recorded it all in a notebook tucked behind his tool belt, his handwriting steady despite the growing unease. July 5, 2024, at 2:30 a.m., Vera appeared in the basement, her silhouette sharp against the flickering lights. She handed him a coffee, black, no sugar, and a folder of network activity, timestamps, and leaked internal emails. "Someone's exporting encrypted files from R&D, she said quietly, "using a backdoor built over a year ago. My father didn't authorize it. I didn't either." Edward scanned the pages, the jargon dense but the intent clear. "This is above my pay grade." "But not your instincts," she replied, her voice firm yet laced with something like faith. He started with the server logs, tracing a data surge to the 13th floor, storage, officially empty. Just past midnight, he pushed open the heavy archive room door, his boots crunching on a torn cable sheath. He followed it to a corner panel, hastily screwed shut. Behind it, a USB relay blinked faintly. Someone had been here. He took photos, then left, locking the door. Footsteps echoed, not John's, not Vera's. A tall figure in a dark coat passed, phone to ear, Phase 2 Wednesday. She suspects nothing. Edward hid in the janitor's closet, breath held, until the man vanished. He went straight to Vera, laying the relay on her desk. "You've got a ghost on 13. Her gaze sharpened. "Did you see who?" "Not clearly," he said. "But I heard enough." He repeated the words. Vera leaned back, arms folded. "Wednesday. That gives us 2 days. To catch them," he said, finishing her thought. July 7, 2024. That night, Edward lay awake, the old radiators hum a restless companion. Lily slept peacefully, but this wasn't just about circuits anymore. Someone wanted to dismantle Vera's legacy. He asked John for 13th floor footage. "Pulled last week by Peter, IT manager," John said. "Seemed odd, but I don't ask questions." Edward did. Peter's schedule matched every surge, signing out before 1 a.m. He watched, silent as a janitor. July 8, 2024, Saturday. Vera, Edward, and Elizabeth, a trusted R&D analyst, planned a trap. A hidden relay on the 13th floor, a fake system update to lure Peter. Sunday, Edward worked normally but watched everything. Every glance, every shadow. He picked Lily up from his sister's, her drawing book clutched tight. "I made this for your toolbox," she said, showing a "Dad's secret weapon" sticker in bold marker. He smiled, sticking it inside the lid. July 13, 2024, midnight Sunday, Edward checked the relay, green, active. At 12:45, Peter entered the archive room, emerging 10 minutes later, typing on his phone. The relay captured every keystroke. Edward called Vera. "We've got him." Tomorrow would shift everything. He walked home under snow-heavy clouds, his breath forming fleeting clouds of relief. He wasn't a detective, but a man who paid attention, and that was enough. July 14, 2024, Monday, Peter strolled unaware. Vera gathered evidence, logs, footage, Edward's relay. At 10:15 a.m., she entered the boardroom with security and legal, saying to Peter, "Come in." He stormed out minutes later, face flushed, fired. Edward watched via camera, nodding subtly. A memo confirmed Peter's exit. Edward cleared the servers of tampering. Vera joined him. "My father hired him. I never questioned his loyalty." "Trust is tricky," Edward said. She handed him a promotion, facilities operations consultant, better pay, strategy meetings. "I didn't do this for a title," he said. "That's why you earned it," she replied, her voice steady but warm. July 15, 2024, days blurred with upgrades. Edward accessed new areas, streamlined systems, his presence no longer invisible. Lily teased his collared shirt, "Fancy." "Less dusty," he grinned. One night by the executive wing's windows, Vera stared at the city's glow. "You okay?" he asked. "I feel exposed," she said. "Cleaning rot shows its depth." "Ever choose between name and people?" she asked. "My daughter," he said. "If she doesn't see me stand, I'm just surviving." Her eyes held respect, maybe admiration. July 18, 2024, a note in Edward's locker read, "Some doors stay locked for a reason." He showed Vera. "Peter?" "Too obvious," he said. He marked blind spots on blueprints, for legacy areas. In the archive room, Vera said, "The deeper we dig, the less solid the ground." "That's how you know you're close," he replied, his voice steady despite the weight. Someone was watching. July 20, 2024, Monday, drizzle coated the city. Edward brought Vera coffee, their alliance unspoken but ironclad. In the south stairwell, a sensor logged 3:15 a.m. movement. No clearance. The feed was wiped. Someone in security had access. In the server room, Edward found packets routed via Whitmore Biotech, defunct 4 years. "My father's pride and shame," Vera said, her voice heavy. "Sealed off." "Personal?" Edward asked. "Everything's personal with family," she replied, her eyes distant. July 22, 2024. On the rooftop, the city's lights flickering below, Vera said, "What if someone higher up is involved? Have we ever been alone here?" Edward recalled his father's words, "Wide smiles hide knives." He visited Michael, a retired IT specialist, in a cluttered apartment of old radios. "Backdoor routing, deep layer masking," Michael said, eyeing logs. "Someone who knows the system." "Your team?" "Maybe Adam, old VP of Tech." July 23, 2024, Edward found Adam was forced out after a vanished whistleblower complaint. "Consultant now, Arlington," he told Vera. They visited Soul Vantage Systems, a nondescript office. Adam admitted building a backdoor for Vera's father. "I gave the key to Henry Parker, his secretary." Vera paled. "He retired." "Did he?" Adam asked. Back at Whitmore, Edward found Henry, alias Marsha Leeds, on the 15th floor. July 23, 2024, Edward entered Henry's office, posing as a cleaner, the air thick with the hum of a hidden CPU running custom code. "You're not just here to clean," Henry said, his eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "I see things," Edward replied, wiping a window. "Curiosity's dangerous," Henry warned. Edward left, confirming to Vera, "He's running it." They planned a keystroke logger. At 2:15 a.m., Edward installed it, heart racing. Data showed Henry's transfers. He typed, "They know." Reply, "Burn phase omega." Vera shut down floors 13 to 16. Edward reached Henry, who said, "This company serves itself. I'm exposing truth." Edward cut the power. Security took Henry, silent. July 24 to 25, 2024, much data was saved, but some lost. Was this my father's fear? Vera asked, her voice raw. Maybe he feared silence, Edward said. Lily showed him a drawing. A man before a machine, wrench like a sword. You fixed it. Not alone, he said. The building felt clean, its shadows named. July 26, 2024, Monday, whispers filled the halls. Edward's new badge gave access. Vera's meeting revealed Henry's purge linked to offshore servers. Ken, audit head, named Vertex Dynamics in vendor logs, tied to Peter. We go old school, Vera said. Edward found a redirected Vertex warehouse, owned by a Silver Spring Trust. A woman there denied Vertex, but Edward snapped photos of invoices and server diagrams. They'd have cloned our tech, Vera said. Go public, but the board falls, Edward warned. Maybe it should, she replied. July 29, 2024, Vera confronted the board, demanding transparency or resignations. 3 quit. We build stronger, she said. Edward met Agent Thomas, who said Vertex spanned 4 companies. Your bait, Thomas told them. Edward mapped blind spots, found a hidden router. Our wiretap, Thomas confirmed. August 5 to 12, 2024, Vera asked, is justice performative? Not if you keep pushing, Edward said, his voice steady. Friday's raid hit Vertex's sites, seizing 22 servers, 3 engineers, a lobbyist. A folder, Echo, named Vera's father. He helped build it, she whispered, dropping the tablet. Tell the truth, Edward urged. She exposed Whitmore's past, sparking thousands of supportive emails. October 15 to 16, 2024, the final report went public. Vera spoke of reforms, Edward, of courage. Corruption doesn't care about titles. Firms audited, laws drafted. A mural in Edward's neighborhood showed them with truth, justice, forward. We survived, Edward said. Over dinner, Vera proposed a whistleblower foundation. You sure? He asked. I am, she said. A DOJ letter praised their impact. Ready to start again? Vera asked. With coffee, Edward grinned. Their legacy was principle, carried in quiet courage. October 23 to 30, 2024, the story of Edward and Vera shows justice begins with honesty and courage, whether janitor or CEO, confronting wrongs and uncomfortable truths.